I've been playing video games for about 17 years. First console was a PlayStation 1, which I played likes of Spyro the Dragon and Crash Bandicoot, which are really kids games. It wasn't until I was older that I started playing more violent games.
I like to play Tomb Raider, but the early Tomb Raiders, because they have auto-aim in them. So I quite enjoy playing puzzle games like Portal. So that's been more my genre, would be playing puzzle games.
As a designer, age appropriateness in games is really important. It's one of your first things you do when designing a game is consider your target audience, and that dictates everything. And from your target audience you can develop what we call a persona, which is the basic character of the person that you're aiming and designing the game for. When you know what your age you're developing for, or what age range you want to develop for, the first thing that comes to mind is the violent content in it, because it changes everything about how the game's designed. I actually don't believe that violence in video games causes people to be violent. There's a lot of evidence to the contrary, in fact. The frequency of game playing in Japan is higher than any other country in the world, and they have one of the lowest violent crime rates. There's some evidence to show that when large games are released, including Grand Theft Auto 5, which is the largest game release of all time, violence in America actually dropped because people were inside playing games instead. But there was not really any strong evidence to prove that people are made violent by games.
There was a recent study which was carried out in 2012 which looked at Hispanic youths, they were teenagers, and they were looking to see if there was an effect on violent video game play and their own violent behaviour. What they found was that there was no relationship between gameplay and violent aggressive behaviour, but what was more important in their study was if the children were being influenced by their peers, also if they were witnessing violent behaviour within the family, and also if they were depressed. These were factors which were found to be more important in them expressing violent behaviour rather than the games that they played. More recent research doesn't really show so much of a relationship between violent gameplay and real aggression. Certainly in America, when you have any kind of school shootings, the first thing that the media tends to blame the school shooting on would be the person who perpetrated it likes to play violent video games. But if you look at the statistics, since 1995, video games sales have doubled in the US, whereas violent offending has actually decreased.
I think the media maybe uses violence in games as a scapegoat to a degree. When games are released and things happen afterwards, it's blamed on the game, even if it's completely unrelated, and it could never be related. There's a lot of stories of people in the weeks after a game like that's released, they do a violent crime and then it's found out that, oh, they play that game, that must be why they did it. The same thing happened with the school shootings in America, when the kids were running around the school, massacring everybody and shouting, oh, this is just like Doom. And people think, oh, well, that's obviously why they did it. Millions of children play these games every year and they don't shoot up a school. So these events would probably happen if the games weren't involved, but because they are involved, they're blamed. Link baiting is what we call it. So news media that want to collect more views on websites and create talking points, and that's why as soon as the game comes up, that's what it's blamed on.
Currently about 85% of video games have violent content within them, and of these about half of them will have severe violence depicted within the games.
People know the difference between real life and a game, which I think a lot of people forget. I've been playing games since I was 17 and I've never, murdered anyone. Although it's a huge industry, it's a young industry, and people like to blame things on stuff they don't understand.
Carried out a research study where I looked at people watching and observing a violent game compared to those watching or observing a puzzle game. And what surprised me was that I found that although there were changes in mood for the violent game player and also the violent game observer, these changes tended to be that the person was more invigorated, they had more energy. They certainly didn't seem to be more angry after playing or watching the violent game.
I actually believe that violence in video games is on the decrease. For what people out with the industry see, you see your blockbuster games, they get loads of coverage and they appear violent, but within the industry we are seeing a real rise in the indie market. So you get small teams of normally between about 5 and 10 people, sometimes a little bit bigger, who are creating new types of games, like puzzle games, adventure games, and they are having a huge resurgence at the moment. As it's expanding, it's becoming different, more people are coming involved, it's becoming more advanced in an intellectual level, and people will start to understand that when it's reflected in media as well.
Gamers play games so that they become at one with the game, and they get a real sort of altered state of consciousness which can be very pleasurable. And this is a great state for people because that's really the state of consciousness that gamers really enjoy. And there's a kind of telepresence where they're almost transported into the game itself. The game designers will continue to make the games that the population are looking for.